Unfortunately, I will just quickly introduce myself, which I don't need too much of an introduction. I've had an interesting life. I'm a Jesuit. I was a former president of Gonzaga, and I've written some books that qualify me to speak on the topic I am going to speak to you about today. What I do want to speak to you about is related to both the talk of George Weigel and Bill McGurn. One of the key points is that there is, as both talks make clear, a rise in secularism. We've seen from Bill McGurn the rise of secularism that's coming through St. Media. We've seen from George Weigel the rise of secularism that comes when you dump overboard the God of Jerusalem and try to make a democracy work, when all of a sudden you find yourself in the midst of cultural suicide, followed by underpopulating suicide, followed by the eclipse. My talk is related in a way to both, because in some ways science has been elevated to a kind of creed. Even though that is a misnomer, because science, for all intents and purposes, can never come to a complete explanation, and every scientist who is honest knows this, because every scientist knows that science is an inductive enterprise. Every scientist knows that science moves from particulars to universals. And because you move from particulars to universals, you can never be sure that you know everything about everything to give the complete explanation, the complete theory that will explain everything. And for that reason, we always have to say, even when scientific truths are rigorously established, then we do at least have to put in the caveat, even when it's really rigorously established, something new could be discovered which could cause an alteration of this theory or model which we consider to be rigorously established, and that could just about change everything. Now, that was the creed for a long, long time in science. Science was very honest about what it did, very honest about the inductive nature of its enterprise. But now we are getting some remarkable claims in the culture that science has the theory of everything about everything. Stephen Hawking told us that in The Grand Design. Should we believe him? The answer is no, because science hasn't changed in one important respect. It's inductive. It can never know whether it has come to a complete explanation of everything about everything. Secondly, all scientists acknowledge that scientific data has to be from within the universe, and it has to have an observational status. By definition, then, anything that's outside the universe is beyond the scope of science. That is what every honest scientist will admit. Yet we are getting some remarkable claims today from Richard Dawkins and other so-called scientific atheists about how science has a prerogative about everything, as if to say that everything is in the world. But you see, science can never prove that everything is in the world, because it can only operate from data in the world. That's like trying to prove from the data in the world that everything is in the world. You can't say, because I know from data in the world that there is nothing outside the world. Well, if you only know data in the world, how would you know whether there is anything outside the world? That is a preposterous enterprise. What is my point? Scientific atheism in our current culture has become not only arrogant, it has become at least a traitor, in my opinion, to its own intrinsic limits, which honest people, honest scientists used to admit. The talk about everything, the whole idea that science can make a pronouncement about what is outside the universe when science has to be based on observational data, which by definition is within the universe. These kinds of claims should alert us to something, that there is an agenda besides science going on, and what I will suggest to you in a moment is that it's a cultural agenda. My first thought. My second thought is this. When we take a look at these kinds of extravagant claims, frankly, unverifiable claims in terms of scientific method, they may be certain claims can be verified about transcendence of the universe philosophically or logically, but it can't be done by science. It's based on observational evidence within the universe. Then, for all intents and purposes, we can say, well, why did that happen? What's going on? Point 2, agnosticism and non-belief and kind of religious malaise among our young people is increasing in a rather frightening way. We can see that at least some surveys indicate that 30% of kids who go to college range from agnosticism to outright non-belief and militant atheism by the time they graduate, when they had gone to college. Believers, firm believers, good Catholics. What happened to that 30%, not just to move them toward agnosticism, but even toward outright unbelief, atheism, right, non-belief, or militant atheism? What happened to these believers in their collegiate experience? Well, aside from the fact that they probably were filled with a bill of goods concerning how bad religion has been throughout history, which both George Weigel and Bill McGurn have talked about already this morning, I think they're also being given a very strange myth, in my opinion. And the strange myth is that science and faith are incompatible. And if you have to make a decision, and you do, because since science and faith are incompatible, you have to make a decision of what you're going to choose. Is it going to be science or faith? Well, I guess science is more objective. I guess science really it enables me to have a microwave oven and enables me to have a computer. I guess science is more reliable. When they're forced to make the choice in order to be authentic to themselves and authentic to the truth, our younger people are choosing science. But they're choosing science on the basis of a false dichotomy. The reason I started the Maggia Center of Reason and Faith and did not continue in the business of university presidencies is because I think we really do have to challenge this myth with real resources and real science so that people can actually see, especially our kids who feel caught up in a false dichotomy, that in fact science and faith are very compatible. Now you might think to yourself, well, wait a minute, if science and faith are compatible, then there must be some evidence from science for God. And the answer is yes. But you just said in your first point that science couldn't make a pronouncement about what is beyond the universe. It can't make a negative pronouncement about what is beyond the universe. It can make a positive pronouncement about what is beyond the universe. And the reason that it can do that is because it can get evidence for a positive pronouncement, namely the existence of a creator, from evidence within the universe. And you go, but how? How can it get evidence for what is beyond the universe from within the universe when it couldn't get evidence to negate what is beyond the universe from within the universe? And the answer lies in this. Science can discover the limits of the universe. And those very limits which are intrinsic to the universe, inside the universe, those very limits can reveal the necessity, or at least the high probability, that something exists outside of our universe. Something really big and powerful and smart. The objective of the Magis Center is to prove this in a very good footnoted way from the best journals in physics, peer-reviewed journals in physics that we have. Review of Physics, Physical Review Letters, etc. And the reason is to expose the lie that lies behind the false agenda among certain people, certain scientists within the culture, that they have the answer to everything about everything, that religion does not have the answer to everything about everything, and that they, as science, become, as it were, the new priests and the new God, as dictators of what everything about everything is supposed to be. You don't need to turn to transcendence. You don't need to turn to religion. Just trust us. We have all the answers, even though scientific methodology from its very beginning doth protest it. We don't, say the scientists, from our inductive point of view, unable to even know whether we have a complete explanation or not. We don't know whether we know everything about everything. The true and humble response. But let's get to the evidence of physics. What is going on today? What is it that our kids need to know? What is it that will be, for all intents and purposes, at least a way of overcoming these two myths that are being perpetuated for whatever cultural agenda or narcissistic agenda or perhaps other kinds of political agendas, but certainly not for a scientific agenda. There's these two myths about what science can and cannot do. First, there is a tremendous amount of evidence for a beginning of the universe. That's the first point. Of course, many of you know that this goes back to a Belgian priest by the name of Father Georges Lemaitre in 1927, who discovered what is now called the Big Bang Theory. He called it the theory of the cosmic atom, but it doesn't really matter. The point is, it is the precursor to the Big Bang Theory. And this Belgian priest kind of had to go up against Einstein, who wanted to believe that the universe couldn't as a whole be expanding, that it was in a steady state. But after Hubble and others had shown conclusively that the scale of the universe demanded that it be expanding, then finally, of course, Einstein did say of Lemaitre's theory, the most satisfying explanation of creation I have ever heard. So he did turn round, because I think Einstein was fundamentally intellectually honest. But I think we need to go deeper. What is it, though, that science is saying today? Here's what we do know. 13.7 billion years ago, plus or minus 200 million years, there was a Big Bang, if we can use that expression, an explosion that gave rise to a rushing out of energy that soon became the universe as we know it. The GTR universe, the general theory of relativity universe, where space and time and mass and energy are in an organic relationship with one another. And in that explosion, there was, of course, the potential to ask the question, was the Big Bang the beginning? Many physicists today believe that the Big Bang is the beginning of the universe, and many physicists in the past have believed the same thing. But there is a possibility that the Big Bang was not the beginning of the universe. It comes with two theories, inflationary theory combined with quantum cosmology. Quantum cosmology is where you combine the four universal forces into what's called a unified field, where gravity is strongly interacting with the other three universal forces, the strong nuclear force, the weak force, and the electromagnetic force. So once you have this in a kind of a unified field, you have a quantum gravitational configuration, which allows for a whole host of possibilities that would not ordinarily be allowed in what we call the GTR universe, where gravity is really in the space-time field, as it were, separated in a way, although organically unified, but separated from the other three universal forces. It's this quantum gravitational configuration and inflationary theory that allows for a pre-Big Bang period. Most of you recognize string theory. String theory is one such hypothesis that tries to justify quantum cosmology, where all of the various particle spins and all of the various particle charges and forces can all be explained by the interaction of certain one-dimensional strings in a 10-dimensional array plus time, or 11-dimensional array called M theory. String theory is a very popular thought, but basically it's totally speculative. There's not a scintilla of evidence for it at all. It is a brilliant theory that has come to pass, and honestly, the mathematics of it are beyond my capacity to understand. Frankly, I think they're getting to the point where you have 16 different physicists trying to figure out these various interrelationships of the strings mathematically, and you're getting pretty close to needing God's intelligence to do it. But in any case, it is one candidate, but it is speculative, and there is no evidence for it. There's another one, loop quantum gravity. It's another candidate for quantum gravity, quantum cosmology, but of course it's speculative, and there's no evidence for that. So the question then is, quite simply, could any of these quantum gravitational configurations have existed before the Big Bang? Meaning that the Big Bang wouldn't be the beginning, and perhaps opening the door to an eternal universe going backwards. The answer seems right now to be, well, even if they did exist, even if there was some string theoretical component, some loop quantum gravitational component, at the end of the day, it seems like they would have to have a beginning too. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. I'm just going to tell you a few of them, just because of the brevity of time, but you can get this on our website for free. There are all kinds of video casts on modusreasonfaith.org, or you can go to that book, New Proofs for the Existence of God, and you can get this very heavily footnoted. But the key thing that I just want to get out right now is, even if you've got a really elegant, really complex, string theoretical, 11 dimensions, right? 10 dimensions plus time in M theory. And you've got an oscillating universe that operates through a string theoretical condition, expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting. Or you have a multiverse where our universe is just a pocket universe amidst all of these other pocket universes in this gigantic multiverse that integrates them all with millions, perhaps an infinity of bubble universes. Even then, what we think we know today about physics, and to be quite humble about it, since physics can't ever know whether it knows everything, there could be a change in these findings. But right now, three theories seem to dictate that a multiverse has to have a beginning. And furthermore, that any expanding universe has to have a beginning, and furthermore, that every oscillating universal system in string theory and higher dimensions or otherwise has to have a beginning. Now you say, before you get into the evidence for this from the vantage point of physics, why is the beginning such a big deal? Because in physics, a beginning points to a creator. Let me repeat that. In physics, a beginning points to a creator. If you have an absolute beginning in physics, what you are talking about is a point at which the universe comes into existence. But not just the universe. Physical time, which is an integral part of the universe, is coming into existence along with the universe. You can't rip the universe out of physical time. Not possible. It's all one big organic unity. And not only physical time and physical space and all mass energy, but all of the constants which control the universe, they all have to come into existence. The entire physical world and its time is coming into existence. What does this mean? Prior to that moment, there was no physical time. Prior to that moment, there's no physical reality. Prior to that moment, the physical universe is nothing. Now, some of you have heard me say this before, but it bears repeating because repetitio est mater studiorum. I can tell some of you were educated by the Jesuits. What does that mean? That means quite literally, nothing is nothing. There's no such thing as nothing. Nothing's not a vacuum. Nothing is not space. Nothing's not empty space. Nothing is not what Stephen Hawking says. It's a low energy state of a quantum field. That's like saying I don't have a bank account just because my balance is zero. You can't say that. Nothing is nothing. When the universe is, the physical universe is nothing, all it is nothing. Now, we know one thing from metaphysics, and if you studied metaphysics, you probably learned it on the first day of class. What's that? From nothing, only nothing comes. The only thing that nothing can do is nothing. Thank you. Don't make nothing do something. Because if you do, that means it's something. Thank you. Pace, Stephen. So what is the point? If the universe couldn't do anything before the beginning point because it was nothing, and nothing can only do nothing, then there is only one conclusion. The universe could not have created itself before the beginning when it was nothing. It couldn't have created itself. It couldn't have brought itself from nothingness to somethingness because that would imply that it could do something. Well, what does that mean? Something else. Really big and completely transcendent. I just a little metaphorically with the really big. Did it. What does that mean? You better think about God. And every physicist who really understands this, and most do, know that's exactly what the implication is. Now, back to the physical data. Oh, wait a minute. What about this quantum gravitational period? What about string theory oscillating universes? What about multiverses, where we're just a little pocket universe amidst many pocket universes and so forth? Are you sure that they all have to have a beginning? Starting in 1993, two physicists now living in America, an Indian physicist, Arvind Borda, and a Russian physicist by the name of Alexander Vilenkin. Arvind Borda, by the way, is at UC Santa Barbara, pretty close to me, and Alexander Vilenkin is over there at Tufts University. They came up with a theory in 1993, which they published in Physical Review Letters, which basically said the following. that if a universe met 5 different conditions, or a multiverse, or an oscillating string universe, or whatever, met 5 conditions, then the universe would actually have to have a beginning. There was no way out of it. Mathematically, it would have to be what's called past-time incomplete. It didn't matter what the physics so much was. It didn't really matter. All that really, it's just as long as it met those 5 conditions, it would have to have a beginning. Boy. Now, in 1997, they discovered a possible loophole called the weak energy exception. But it really didn't apply to our universe. And it didn't apply at all to any universe that our universe could be connected to, like a multiverse. But nevertheless, it was a loophole. And people said, well, you got to give it, science could discover something, and it could. Well, then in 1999, an American physicist by the name of Alan Guth, who's the father of inflationary theory, holds the high chair of cosmology, by the way, at MIT, he discovers, after modeling every possible way of looking at the universe, every inflationary model universe, he comes up with this astounding conclusion. Try, as physicists and mathematicians have, to find some model of the inflationary universe which does not have a beginning. They have been unable to do so. It seems that every model of an inflationary universe is eternal into the future, but never into the past. It must always have a beginning. Ooh, that says something. This computer modeling is based on real observational data, and it is projecting real limits of real universes in inflationary conditions. But just to make sure the point stuck, the 3 of them got together at MIT one day. And when they got together, they created a theorem in 2003 called the BVG theorem. The Borda, Vilenkin, and Guth theorem. What is this theorem, and why has it stirred such controversy, and why is it so important? Basically, the entire theorem is based upon one condition only. And that condition is that the average Hubble expansion of our universe, any other universe, a multiverse, a string theoretical oscillating universe in higher dimensions, that the sole condition is that the average Hubble expansion be greater than 0, no matter how small. What's an average Hubble? The rate of the expansion of the universe as a whole. So long as the rate of the universe as a whole, the rate of expansion of the universe as a whole, is some greater than 0 number, no matter how small, that multiverse, that string oscillating universe, this universe, any other universe that we can conceive of in an inflationary condition, or in having an average rate of expansion greater than 0, would have to have, beginning. To this date, 2011, no one has found an exception. This is not to say that physicists have not been trying to do so. They have been trying to. We even have a couple of really interesting ones where physicists actually tried to completely deconstruct time and make it go backwards when it's going forwards, and putting it into a strange de Sitter space and everything. But finally, honestly, most physicists just throw up their arms and go, this is so physically unrealistic in fantasy land, no one's ever going to accept it. I mean, we are literally, the current state of the question right now is basically saying it is very likely, it is very probable, and if the BVG theorem is true, and if it does apply to every multiverse and oscillating universe, and it should, because there's only one condition, that the average Hubble expansion be greater than 0, then it's very likely that our universe, or any multiverse, or any oscillating condition in which it might be immersed, would have to have a beginning, with all of the implications appertaining thereto. Now you might say to yourself, well, why doesn't my kid know about this? Because, well, it's a good question, isn't it? And the simple answer to that question is because there are a lot of people out there who don't want your kid to know that. This is going to come as a shock to you. But Stephen Hawking, who is a that's a space-time theorist, right? He forgot to mention in his new book, The Grand Design, he forgot to mention the entire BVG theorem. In fact, he forgot to mention Borda and Vilenkin. He forgot to mention Guth. He forgot to mention Borda, Vilenkin, and Guth. He forgot all of this modeling. It just didn't appear. A very strange omission. Is it because the data is not telling? No, I think it is because the data isn't what it's supposed to be. There is a misinterpretation of the Hartle-Hawking theorem, which seems to indicate, this in the misinterpretation, that the universe can go backwards. That's not what the Hartle-Hawking theorem says at all. The Hartle-Hawking theorem says there absolutely is a finite boundary to pastime in the universe. It's just a fuzzy boundary. Doesn't mean it... I'm sorry? Okay. I have 10 minutes. That doesn't mean that it doesn't have a beginning. Well, I just want to say that's the first thought. The second thought, which I don't have time to explain today, is the theory of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics basically says that the universe is going to run down. It's basically going to lose all of its free energy, which is capable of doing things. We started off with very low entropy at the Big Bang. But one thing is certain, there is no perpetual motion machine that we know of in the universe, and the second law of thermodynamics have never been contradicted, ever. That means the universe with a finite amount of energy, finite amount of mass energy, will eventually have to run down to zero free energy, completely incapable of doing anything at thermodynamic equilibrium, dead, dead-o, dead. Now, the universe is not dead, dead-o, dead. It is at a very low entropy still, which of course implies that the universe may be finite in time. Now, there are a lot of physicists trying to get out of this, and there's some really fancy theorems that are going out there, but there is not a scintilla of evidence that would suggest that the second law of thermodynamics is not applicable to them. Even the big rip stuff, it's just simply beholding to entropy's inexorable move toward death. But we are not there yet. And that would suggest we've been around for a finite amount of time, which, when you combine it with those three space-time geometry proofs of Borda, Vilenkin, Guth, and then Borda, Vilenkin, and Guth, all of a sudden you begin to say, hey, there seems to be a striking amount of evidence out there that the universe has a beginning. Even though any of that could change, there could be something discovered, because science can never come to a complete explanation. But at the same time, there seems to be a beginning, and if there is a beginning, then it would seem to imply that since from nothing only nothing can come, the universe couldn't have created itself out of nothing, and therefore there's a likelihood, even from the vantage point of physics, discovering its own limits and the limits to the universe itself, can ascertain that there might be something really transcendent and big out there. There may well be a creator on the basis of physics. But that's not the entire story. A whole other area of development has also occurred, which some of you heard the other night in the movie Cosmic Origins. And the key thought there is just as follows. There is a set of conditions and a set of values of constants which are absolutely necessary for any life form to develop in the universe. Absolutely necessary. And the key thought, I'll just give you a few of them and you can get the major point. The first thing is you need low entropy at the Big Bang to have life. Why? Because you need some usable energy. You can't have life develop in a rundown universe. You have to have life develop in a universe that has the free energy, the usable energy that will allow that life to sustain itself and develop. What are the odds of low entropy occurring at the Big Bang by pure chance? 10 raised to the 10 raised to the 123 to 1. Against. That's a double exponent. Let me tell you what that is. That's a 10, and then in the exponent, a 1 with 123 zeros after it. In the exponent. So that really, if you tried to write this number out with every zero being 10-point type, our Milky Way, our galaxy, could not hold that number. The odds of low entropy occurring at the universe by pure chance are so exceedingly low that it is literally like saying to a monkey, "Monkey, type out the entire corpus of Shakespeare in 2 weeks by random tapping of the keys. I'm coming back in and I'm going to check." The monkey begins to furiously type on the typewriter. And as, of course, he completes his work, you walk in and there's Macbeth and Hamlet and Richard III, and you say, "Whoa, that's highly improbable." And so it is. And so you surmise that someone has snuck into the room unbeknownst to you with a very well-developed knowledge of Shakespeare and has helped the monkey. And so Penrose at one point actually did say, he considered it a matter of a creator selecting all the parameters necessary for low entropy at the beginning of the universe. But there's, 5 minutes. My assistant is good to me. Let me just give you a few constants, tell you what the Modus Institute is doing, and try to stay on time myself. Just a couple of things. We have these things called constants in the universe. A constant basically is a number, but it is a number which controls the equations of physics. Now remember, the equations of physics describe the real physical laws of nature, right? So these numbers are controlling the laws of nature. Now, there are 17 of these constants that are what we call originative constants, like the speed of light constant, right, 300,000 kilometers per second or 186,200 miles per second. Some of you heard Planck's constant, Hubble's constant, and so forth, cosmological constant. Every force in our universe has a constant. So there's a strong nuclear force constant, a weak force constant. There are 3 electromagnetic constants, right, the mass of proton, mass of an electron, electromagnetic charge. Gravitation obviously has a constant, and so forth. We learned that in Physics 101. Okay, now, you've got these constants. Get this, everybody. If just 2 of these constants, the gravitational constant and the weak force constant, had varied from their values by 1 part in 10 to the 50, higher or lower, that's a really small fraction, right? It's a decimal point, 49 zeros, and a 1. It's really small. If it had varied ever so slightly higher or lower, by 0.1, the universe would have either continually exploded in its expansion to this current day, which would have been very bad for life forms. Burn them all up, never even get a chance. Or it would have collapsed into a Schwarzschild black hole, where the entire mass of the universe is in 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. A little too snug for life to develop. I guess we must be really, really, really lucky that somehow these 2 constants had the precise values within 1 part in 10 to the 50 that they need. Okay, I grant you. Okay, just pure luck. It happened. Did you know that if the strong nuclear force was just 2% higher than its current constant value, that we have no hydrogen in the universe? That would be very bad for life forms. And if it were 2% lower, there'd be no element heavier than hydrogen in the universe, which is equally bad for life forms. Did you realize that if the electromagnetic charge, if the mass of the proton compared to the mass of the electron, or the gravitational constant, were off by 1 part in 10 to the 39, those 3 constants, higher or lower, every single star in the universe would either be a blue giant or a red dwarf. This is bad, because if it were a blue giant, everything would get fried. And if it were a red dwarf, there wouldn't be enough energy to sustain a single cell. we're really lucky. The point I'm trying to say is, if you really believe that this could occur by pure chance, and no, by the way, even Stephen Hawking doesn't believe that this could occur by pure chance. I'm going to wrap it up here. I mean, everybody believes there has to be an explanation for this. You cannot roll the dice and have this happen. So what are the two current explanations outside of pure chance? Obviously, God, smart creator deity, deigns it so and writes this into the original constant prescriptions at the Big Bang. Other alternative explanation, the multiverse explanation, where thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pocket universes are rolling out of the multiverse as with new rolls of the die, right? And you get to try again and again and again, and maybe pure chance and lady luck will allow these incredible odds to occur by random selection out of this huge multiverse. Only two problems with the multiverse. Number one, it's just as metaphysical as God. So pick your metaphysics, everybody, because it has nothing to do with physics. And point number two, pretty important, all the metaphysical explanation, all the multiverse explanations that we currently have require fine-tuning in the initial parameters. What does that mean? It means design in the very initial parameters. Because you see, you can't have bubble universes rolling out arbitrarily. You have to have a very slow roll of bubble universes coming out, which requires a lot of fine-tuning and design in those initial parameters. Because if those bubble universes start bumping into each other like jellos, it's really the whole space-time continuum of the universe is vibrating like a jello. This is bad for life form development. What's my point? I think at the end of the day, it is just as reasonable and responsible, nay, more reasonable and responsible based on the physical evidence and data that we have today, that there was a beginning of the universe, that beginning implies a creator of the universe, and that there is some kind of intelligence, super calculating, super intellect, that allows those constants of the universe to have the precise values and conditions that they need to have in order for a single life form of any kind to develop in the universe whatsoever. I don't think we were lucky. And I think that the multiverse explanation falls incredibly far short, and in fact just moves the whole problem back a step. What's the deal? I leave you with two quotes at the end of the day. First, from Fred Hoyle, used to be the greatest atheist in physics. Always. Hoyle came up with this after he discovered the range in which the resonance levels of beryllium, hydrogen, helium, and oxygen had to be in order to get a carbon atom, right? He just finally said, there are no blind forces worth speaking about. There must be some super calculating super intellect that has monkeyed with the constants of physics to make them felicitously dovetail so as to make for the possibility of a life form. He compared the very possibility of carbon occurring by pure chance in the universe. He said, well, it's like a tornado blowing through a junkyard, assembling a Boeing 747 ready for flight. Secondly, I leave you with Robert Jastrow, NASA's Goddard Institute of Space Studies director and founder. And this is what he said. He said, in the end, scientists have scaled the cliffs of knowledge. And they unshackled themselves from superstition, put on a methodology of mathematics and measurement, of empirical observation, and began to scale the heights. They came to the final precipice, pulled themselves over, and found a band of theologians there awaiting them for centuries. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.